Hey guys, this is DDBeast for BlueFirePoker. I'm going to do a quick little hand analysis for you guys today, and we're going to try to do it from a purely mathematical, objective viewpoint, so we can very clearly make the best decision. So this is submitted by a player Talaric, who comes in for a min-raise under the gun. It's completely standard with this stack size. We get flatted in two spots, and the reads that I was given on these players by him is that Obviments is a fairly good aggressive player, and LMAC is a random and assumed pretty fishy. And our image is that we are just kind of a standard tight aggressive image for now. So we flop very poorly. It's about as bad as they come. There's very few flops that I'm not trying to get all my chips in with kings and this stack depth. So this is one of the few flops where I might start by checking. And he does, which I like. It's going to keep our range nice and balanced so that we're not just check raising draws and weaker pairs, and we're not just check folding a bunch of hands. It's nice to have a strong pair like this in our range. So I definitely like the check for starters. And we get bet into by Obviments and a call. And at this point, I think the decision is between a check raise, likely check raise all in, or check fold. The reason I'm dissuaded by check calling is it's just going to be incredibly difficult to continue the hand. There's simply just so many bad cards to come on the turn or river. Really, any ace, queen, jack, 7, 6, any heart, 10, really any card that pairs the board isn't great. There's just like so few total bricks that we'll be happy getting all our chips in that I think if we do have the necessary equity to continue, that we should just try to get all our chips in immediately and not be forced to likely fold the best hand in future streets. I think that would be the best course of action. So we need to decide if that's going to be profitable or not. And I think the best way to do it is, for now, we can calculate with 3 people, but it's going to be really complex and take too long. So I think what I'm going to do is focus on Obviments, because that's the player I'm concerned about. LMAC, when he flats in this spot on this flop, he's just so rarely going to have a strong hand. He's not going to be slow playing a set. He might slow play Queen Jack once in a blue moon, but for the most part, he's going to have a lot of draws, a lot of weak draws. He's going to have like Ace 9 and 8 6, just maybe some heart draws. He's going to have a lot of weaker hands that we're going to have pretty good equity against, and a lot of hands that are probably going to fold if we get all our chips in anyway. So I'm not too concerned about him. I'm going to focus on Obviments. And what we need to find out is A, the percentage of the time that he's going to call our check raise and stack off, and naturally that'll give us the percentage of the time that he's folding as well. And then we need to find out his equity and our equity. And the way I've calculated this is A, I've kind of comprised a little pre-flop flatting range. I've included queens are better, but I've discounted them because he's likely 3-betting those for the most part. And then I've kind of included just like all these kind of medium strength hands that he might flat with. And I know he 3-bets a lot, but we're again just looking for hands that he might flat in this spot, and this seems like a pretty reasonable range. Also, with these hands, I think he's going to bet 100% of them. A lot of them connect to the flop because this flop just right in the middle there simply just hits a lot of hands at flat. So a lot of them he connects with. I think he's going to bluff with like Ace Queen or anything that he doesn't connect with, because he should connect with this and he should be betting here. So I think once he sees the 2 checks, including the pre-flop raiser, that he's going to bluff here with all his. He's going to bet here with all his hands, some of which will be bluffs. So that's the range of hands he's betting. As far as hands that he's going to call check raise with, I think it's going to look something like this. And what I've done here is I've taken out Ace Queen. He's not going to stack off with that. And then I've discounted these suited hands to just include hearts. So there's 3 combos of each of these suited hands. So I've taken out 2 of those combos so that effectively he's only getting in when he has hearts. So I took out a few hands. Basically, we went from 79.9 combos, you can see it here, to 56.3 combos. So that's the info we're going to use, and we're simply just going to divide those 2 numbers, and that's going to be the percentage of the time that he continues in the hand. As far as and naturally a percentage that he folds is going to be 1 minus this answer. Then our equity and his equity in the hand is really simple. Find the stack off range, and it just spits it out right here. Equity 1 is his equity, that's 54%, and our equity is going to be 45% with the kings. So that just goes right here. And this is the equation we're going to use to find our expected value in the hand in tournament chips. And this is all color-coded for your pleasure. So we got the probability that he calls is 70%, and we're going to multiply that by our equity in the hand and the amount of chips we stand to gain, and add that to his equity in the hand, which is essentially our equity of losing, just the percentage of the time we lose, and multiply that by the amount of chips we stand to lose should we lose that pot. And then we're going to add that to the probability that he folds, and that's going to simply gain us that dead money in the pot. So it's really easy to start plugging in numbers. It's really simple because it's 70% here, 45% equity here, and so on. This chips 1 is going to be this 19,592. Okay, I see. So sorry, it's going to be a 17,319 plus 1,800 plus 1,800 plus 4,460. That's what we stand to gain if we win the pot and we get it in. What we stand to lose is his entire stack, which is with the 1,800 is 19,919. So that's where we're putting at risk here. And then the dead money is simply going to be 1,800 plus 1,800 plus 4,460. That's the money we're going to pick up when he just folds to our check raise. So we're simply going to plug those numbers in. This is really basic addition and multiplication. Should be third grade math. So I just condensed it a little here and just summed up these numbers. And Excel will spit this out pretty easily and give us our answer. It's going to be 3,072 chips, which is not an inconsiderate amount at all. That's 5 big blinds at this stage, which is pretty considerable. Again, we have to take into consideration that we didn't include LMAC in this equation, but there's no range that he's going to have that's going to be enough to overcome this advantage. It's definitely going to be plus EV. So it seems pretty apparent that the answer is jam, in hindsight, now that we've done all the math. In the hand, our hero actually flats, which again isn't, I'm not a huge fan of, but it's not like god-awful, because we were getting pretty good odds, and Obvious bet less than half pot. So it's simply nothing crazy. It's just going to be difficult. Luckily, we get a dream turn, just bricks off, but we get another bet by Obvious. And this time, it's very committing. It's like a third of his stack. And strangely, LMAC flats as well. Again, at this point in the hand, I'm thinking both players are folding so rarely. Once they commit, 30% of their chips, it just seems incredibly unlikely that they're going to fold at any point. Even if we both get it in, I think LMAC's getting in with any sort of draw at this point, and he should. So the question is, should we continue by check raising all in? I think calling is definitely out of the question at this point. So should we again fold or check raise? And I think at this point it's fair to treat a check raise the same as if they were jamming. Essentially, I'm thinking our check raise is getting called 100% of the time. So for simplicity, I'm just going to assume that Obvious jammed his stack in and LMAC called, because I think if we check raise, there's no way that either of these two players are folding. So that's what I'm going to be testing for, and it's going to be a lot simpler, and we can do this with 3 people rather easily. So again, we're trying to find out the minimum equity needed, and the way we're going to do that is simply compute our pot odds first. We're risking 17,792. That's our entire stack. We cover Obvious by about 400 chips. LMAC covers us, and we're risking that to gain 17,792 plus his entire stack plus the 9860 in the middle. So all that together is going to be nearly 45,000. And then to calculate our pot odds, we're simply going to divide those two numbers. Divide that 44,000 by the 17,000. That's going to give us this 2.5 to 1. And then to convert that into pure equity, we're going to do 1 divided by this 2.52 plus 1. And that's going to give us this 28.35% equity required. Okay, so what the hell does that mean? Well, we can then take our ranges and plug it into PokerStove. Again, I made a little range for obviments. I think this is the range that he would bet the turn and get it in. You'll note that I dropped off stuff like Ace-Jack and Jack-9 and Jack-10 because I think he's going to check back those kind of weaker hands that still have a good amount of equity. I think he's going to check those back and try to do well on the river. And because I don't think he's going to be thrilled about getting those hands in. So I took out some of those weaker draws and left him with his stronger draws, stronger heart draws, obviously straight, his sets, 2-pair, and his big pairs. As far as El Mac, he's kind of all over the place. Just lots of pair plus draw hands. Again, this is the weaker player that's going to be calling too much with the weaker combo draws. So he's got a lot of weak hands in his range, and that's why it's going to be close, and we might have equity continue. So we're going to do a 3-way all-in, plug this in Poker Stove, and again, you can see I've got sets, over pairs. This is player 2 is obviments. I got heart draws, Ace-10, and then for El Mac, just a lot of draws, heart draws, open-enders, pair plus draws, a lot of that type of hand. And you can see we have 29.9, which is just above the 28.35% required. So with these ranges, and I think these are pretty accurate, because this is assuming that they're basically never bluffing. I mean, we have some heart draws, but these are all strong heart draws plus straight draws that Obviments is betting. So it's a slight semi-bluff, but we have no air balls in his range at this point. So even with that kind of conservative range for both of them, we got 29.9%. We only need 28%. So it appears that the answer is to jam it in. What does our hero do? Jams it in like a boss. Well played, sir. Sorry I don't have results for you guys, but appears that he definitely played the turn correctly, given all the math we just did. And maybe he could have played the flop differently. I would have preferred the jam on the flop. But again, we can simply find the best answers using these math equations. So this is the key to success, and you'd like to see more of it, tune into BlueFire and check out some of my videos. It's DDBeast signing out.
So in this hand here we have Ace Queen offsuit, Ace of Diamonds, Queen of Spades, and it sort of gets folded around, I believe. And the villain in this hand is on the button, and he decides to go ahead and make an opening raise to 12, so 3x raise, and the hero decides to go ahead and flat, which I think is fine. I think calling's certainly a decent option there. I don't hate 3-betting if your post-flop skills are exceptional, but I think it's safe to say that for the vast majority of people, I think they're going to get themselves in less difficult spots here by just flatting Ace-Queen. So flop comes King 6-10, so really good because we got a overcard and a gut shot to the nuts. It's also a difficult board for a 40% range on the button to connect with super strongly, and we're really deep, so if something good does happen, like a jack rolls off, then potentially there can be a big pot to be won. So our hero in this hand starts off by checking, and villain bets. I love how we do this, by the way. You know, we're hero and everyone else is villain, and I don't know who came up with that. I think that'd be an interesting one, but yeah, it's just such a strong word, villain, and we're hero, of course. So anyway, back to the action here. So bets 20 and do 26, and our hero here goes ahead and makes a check raise to 86. So a pretty big check raise, which I think is good. I think it's totally fine. And you know, you should be able to get a like King X off their hand eventually, I think. Maybe some stubborn people or some fish won't, but you know, maybe a King X might call 1 but not 2. And it's a good way to get someone to put some money in before, and especially if stacks are deep, before they fold. So raise it to 86, which I think is good. and villain decides to flat. So let's first think about his flatting range. Spoiler alert, we made the nuts on the turn, or the hero makes the nuts on the turn. But so I think his call could be, well, it just depends on sort of how loose he is, or you know, he's a 12-10, which kind of or 14-12 as we said, which kind of throws me a little bit, because I just assume all 14-12s just like fold all their gut shots here and just play super straightforward and, you know, put their opponent on a set or something. But you know, at the same time, there's not a whole lot of big time monster hands Hero can represent here. In fact, if I was playing this pot, I could represent exactly 0 strong hands here, except King 10 probably, because I would probably, with these stacks, I would definitely just go ahead and 3-bet all my pocket pairs, and have plenty of room to call the 4-bet if it comes. So I could never represent anything but King 10 here. Maybe like I could have like King 6 suited or something, but a lot of people don't 3-bet all their pocket pairs though in that spot. So in Villain's mind, he could be on like 6s, 10s, probably not kings. He would probably expect kings to 3-bet pre-flop. And probably like a, you know, maybe something like Hero has ace queen, ace jack, queen jack certainly. You know, and then there's like the queen 9s and then the jack 9s. So I guess there's a lot the villain can really continue with, given he has position, and given that he has very deep stacks behind. So there's going to be a lot of room for him to make some plays. And, you know, he can make a turn raise and get re-raised and still call. Like if he were, for example, to have like 9-8 of diamonds and decide that villain's going to have, or excuse me, the hero is going to have a tough time getting to showdown with his King 10 or King 6 or whatever if he got raised here in this spot. If he was wrong, he could still go ahead and call, because if Hero bet, you know, 150 and villain made it 340, you know, Hero's probably not going to go straight to shoving. He's probably going to make it something like 7 or 8, and then villain will have the price to try and draw out. So I would think that the villain, if he's any good at all, would be peeling with basically anything on this board, like any, not any 2, but like certainly any type of, I don't like 7-8 of, like, I probably wouldn't peel if I were a villain with something like 7-8 of diamonds, because the 9 can just get you in so much trouble. So I don't really know kind of what I'm looking for. If the 9 comes, I really can't ever raise him. But I would definitely call the gut shot with like 8-9 of diamonds or something like that, or 8-9 of spades, or 8-9 of clubs. Like if I had a backdoor and a gut shot, that would be plenty, given that I can potentially win a humongous pot if something good comes. So I think villain's range can be pretty wide, even though he's a 14-12. There's probably a good chance he would peel one, given, you know, a couple $1,000 behind. It's only being $60 more to him, or approximately $60. So Hero makes the nuts on the turn, and Hero bets 164 into approximately I guess it was, what was it, 190, something like that. I think here in this spot, I guess it was 198 we'll go with. That must be the math. I would probably, I think this is a good spot probably for an overbet, because so much of villain's range just, I think, has to continue. You know, if he had something like, you know, a king queen, you know, if he had something like a, you know, a pair and a flush draw, something like queen 10 of diamonds, although I think that would be a hand I'd be less likely to peel with if I were villain, because it kind of takes 2 good cards in a row to really make a big hand. But you never know. And you know, he can't have like an ace queen of diamonds or anything like that, because we have the ace of diamonds. Can't have ace jack of diamonds because the jack of diamonds came, obviously. So yeah, so I would probably think that so much of his range is probably going to have to call here on the turn, because it's going to have, there's going to be so many 2 pairs and so many pairs and draws, and if that and villain can definitely still have like pocket kings and play it this way, or pocket sixes, or pocket tens. Probably not pocket jacks. So I think that this is if you're ever going to make an overbet, I think this is a good spot to do it, especially since your hand is. It's really hard for villain to put you on the nuts in this spot because basically you have to have ace. You have to have made a big check raise with ace queen, and he might be thinking more along the lines of a draw or a two pair or a set on the flop. So he might think, maybe you check raise with something like 8-9 of diamonds, and now you're overbetting when you pick up all this equity. But either way, I just think that it doesn't really matter what he thinks. He's just going to peel so much that I think this is a good spot to just go ahead and make it like 250 or maybe even a little more, and just try and get some mega value given the stacks. So hero makes the bet of 164 and villain decides to flat, and then the 5 of diamonds comes, and hero goes ahead and leads for looks like around 444, and villain shoves. And so yeah, this is throw up time right here. This sucks. There's no question about that. I think this is a 6 spot. I think it becomes less sick because villain was described as a 14-12, doesn't even really have a big button steal, only 40%, which I think is really low these days. Just kind of seems like a nit, and I don't really think, given there's a straight on the board, a couple of straights on the board, I guess ace queen, queen 9 have a straight, with ace queen, queen 9 having a straight, and with the flush draw making it, I just can't see him ever jamming, kings, 10s, 6s, anything like that. I think it would be really sick if you were playing against a very, very good opponent who you think can be turning their hand into a bluff here from time to time. Like maybe it would take something like king queen with the queen of diamonds, or some type of hand like that, and go ahead and shove here. But then on the other hand, just kind of turning their hand into a bluff. But on the other hand, what is a little bit sick about this is that we have the ace of diamonds, so we know that villain here cannot be shoving the nuts. And since it's impossible for him to have the nuts, that's why I say if you're against a very, very good tricky player, I think that this would be really sick, because he has to be even going for some like thin value shove in a way, and if we feel like he can only he can't shove any sets or anything like that, and he obviously can't be shoving the nuts, then that only leaves just a few combos, maybe like a 9-8 of diamonds, or a queen. I guess he could definitely show up with queen 9 of diamonds in this spot. That would be part of his pre-flop raising range with 40%. It should be in his call of the check raise on the turn range. It would have required a slow play on the turn, but at the same time, he didn't have a whole lot to worry about, given that ace queen would have already had him beat. But he's probably not putting hero on a diamond draw very often, and he's already got the straight with a redraw. So that's definitely possible. 9-8 of diamonds, maybe less so. I don't know if he'd really, he can't have ace 10 of diamonds, obviously. And he can't have queen jack of diamonds either, because there's a jack of diamonds there. So, all the flushes that he can have to be essentially gut shots that went runner-runner, like gut shots on the flop, like 9-8, maybe 7-8, even though I wouldn't recommend peeling with that, and queen 9 of diamonds. I mean, I suppose it's possible he could have a hand like queen 10 of diamonds, but it just seems like not a good spot to call the check raise, and him being a 14-12 doesn't seem, I guess, too super likely, but I think that can be in there. So the bottom line is, as sick as this is, I do think it's actually a pretty clear fold because we can find several combos that he can shove here potentially, and I do think it becomes really sick if you're against a very, very good opponent because they can quite easily have be turning their hand into a bluff, but at the same time there are still plenty of combos that they could have that would play it this way that could be shoving for value as well. So I think that's where it gets a little sicker, but I think in this spot you just have to fold and feel dirty about it and all those things that we all feel. But yeah, I think that's in order. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it useful, and hopefully you'll join me in Blue Fire Poker and watch more of my videos with more of my analysis.
This is Alan Jackson making a video for Blue Fire Poker. Today we're doing a short hand review. This hand we open up kings in the hijack. We get called by the cutoff and the button, and both the blinds fold. Gave us a few stats for the cutoff and the button. The cutoff is VPIP of 16, PFR of 11, aggression 2.4, 1600 hands. Button is 11. VPIP, PFR of 8, aggression of 3.9, 1200 hands. To say the least, the players are a bit on the nitty side. When we get to the flop, we're going to come back to that in order to start hand reading versus these guys. So we get the flop, not a bad flop here. It's low, not too connected. We go ahead and c-bet this, which we obviously are. There's just no other choice here. Now, I would like to talk a little bit about bet sizing here. I think in terms of my opponent's range elasticity, and by that I mean what are our opponents planning on doing when we bet, and how elastic is that range, or inelastic as it may be. Now let's go back to their pre-flop cold calling range. Both these players are fairly nitty, and there's a concept I call the spread, and that's the distance between the VPIP and the PFR. The button is 3, and the cutoff is 5. Those are fairly tight cold calling ranges. 5 isn't especially tight, but given that his pre-flop raise is so low, that still leaves a cold call range that is fairly value heavy here. And so, in my opinion, both these players have a fairly inelastic range here, meaning that hands they cold call with are going to call regardless of our bet size here, within reason. And so it looks like here we're doing a standard 2/3 pot bet size here, but when I feel like my opponent's ranges are fairly inelastic, then I pump up my bet sizing, and I would go something, say, like 385, 390 here, still expecting all their diamond draws to call, and a lot of their pocket pairs. 4s, 5s, and 6s kind of being the borderline hands here, and this is where some more stats would be helpful. I would like to know what these players' 3-bet frequency is, and what their fold versus flop, turn, and river c-bets are, to help me better determine what they're doing and what sort of range they have. For example, if these players had higher 3-bets, then I could take more of their diamond draws out of their range, because I would expect them to take, ace, queen of diamonds, and then possibly like ace, jack of diamonds, king, queen of diamonds, and 3-bet bluff them, instead of cold calling with them. Now, however, with these players having fairly nitty pre-flop stats, it's pretty doubtful that they have a highest 3-bet to go with that. That would be an unusual combination. So I'm going to assume that they're flatting most of those hands, particularly in these spots. It's not a steal versus steal situation, and the button, I'm sure, is not much of a squeezer. So I do fully put in their ace queen, possibly king queen of diamonds, and in the villains, the cutoff spot, I think ace jack of diamonds is a possibility, a borderline, although I think the button, I would be doubtful that they would, with a 3-point spread, that they would be cold calling with that, but it is possible given that it ended up being 3-way. So long story short is I think the ranges are fairly inelastic, and so I'd pump up my bet size here a little bit. the cutoff ends up calling us, and the button ends up folding. Now, since the cutoff called us, we can really take all the junk out of their range. With the button left to act, their ability to float there is pretty limited, and this is where knowing what their full versus flop c-bet is would be helpful here to know how floaty they are. But even guys that are fairly floaty, like let's say they've got two overs, like ace queen with the ace of diamonds, are going to have trouble floating here because they're going to be afraid that the flop's going to go three-way, or that the button might squeeze them out and they have to fold. Basically, their ability to float is really limited here, and so I do give the villain here a hand. I would not give him fours, fives, or sixes. I would give him twos, threes, sevens, eights through jacks, and then diamond draw. So the 7 is both a good and a bad card. It's good in that it limits a little bit the number of sets our opponent can have, and if I didn't mention it before, I really don't give this guy hands like 7-6, 7-8, 8-7 in his cold calling range. It's not that it's not possible. It's just that with his spread, with his cold calling range, it's just a fairly unlikely hand for him to have. Now, the 7 helps us out a little bit because if he has pocket 2s, pocket 3s, we just got 2 more outs. Obviously, that it's a diamond is bad because it just made his diamond drop. So the question comes here is, do we bet or do we check? And I think check folding is out of the question. I think check raising is out of the question. So it's either betting or it's check calling. Now, one of the biggest leaks I find in a lot of players' games is an unwillingness to value bet the turn thinly. And that can be a fairly big leak because of a concept I like to call the equity giveaway. So whenever you don't bet the turn thinly for value, your opponent, whether they're in position or out of position, gets to make, if they're in position, they can check back and take a free shot at improving. If they're in position, obviously they're going to get that free card because you just gave it to them. Now, in this situation, that's not a consideration at all because we've got the king of diamonds here. So if they've got eights through jacks with a single diamond, we're not giving away any equity. We're actually going to give them a chance to catch up here a little bit. But we'll still have the best hand here. Now, if I had pocket kings here without a diamond here, I would most likely go ahead and bet the turn, expecting to get value from eights through jacks. It's a question of and this is where a fold versus double barrel stat would be useful. A really low fold versus double barrel, say like 35%, and I think we do get value from pocket eights through pocket jacks without a diamonds, without that single diamond. Certainly with the diamond, and I'd say up to 45% fold versus turn barrel. We're certainly going to get him calling us again with an overpair with the diamond redraw. And we want to get value from that when we don't have that diamond here. Now, we do have the diamond covered, so when we check here, we're really not giving away hardly any equity at all. And I don't give this guy any credit for floating here with a hand like ace queen with like the ace of diamonds, which is specifically the only hand that we're really giving away much equity for, because I just don't think he's floating much in this situation with one player left to act. So, all that being said, the equity giveaway here is not a big deal at all because we're only giving away really 2 outs. So like, let's say they have pocket eights, we're really only worried about that 8 showing up. So we're hardly giving away any equity at all. Now, the other consideration we have is our hand good enough for 3 streets worth of value? Now, the more our hand is good for 3 streets worth of value, the more we want to be the one betting the turn so we can bet the river, because once we take this check call route, it's going to be difficult to bet the river, and a lot of times the river's going to end up going check check. And if it was a situation where we would have been triple barreling quite a bit, then we definitely don't want to take this check call a line here. And so this, once again, this is where a few more stats would be useful. What is his win to showdown? You know, if you tell me his win to showdown's like 30, 32%, maybe his full to triple barrel is 35 or 40%. Now I'm thinking this is the guy that's always going to hero, not always, but will frequently hero calls with any overpair here, and so we would be able to bet turn and river for value. But that would be an unusual nitty type opponent. Usually most of these guys are not super showdown prone, and they're not going to give you 3 streets of value. So that's actually a long way of me saying I think the check call here is a reasonably good play. I wouldn't mind betting, but I do think the check call is fine. Now he puts in a 2/3 pot bet. That's concerning. It's not much of a blocking bet. Looks like it's for value. The 3 shows up on the river. Once again, this is kind of a beneficial card for us. You know, there's now fewer sets the guy can have, but then he goes ahead and puts another, you know, good sized bet in here. Now we have 2 questions we have to ask here on the river. First off, could our opponent be value betting worse? That would be very, very unlikely. I just don't think he's going to take something like pocket jacks here and go for value here. I think he's just going to be happy to get the showdown and just check it back. Now the second question is, can our opponent be bluffing here? Now, as far as getting to the river with air hands, I think is extremely unlikely. Given my read on previous streets, I just don't think there's any air that could be in his range that he needs to bluff with. So it's really just a consideration of, can this guy turn a mate hand into a bluff? Very few players are able to turn mate hands into bluffs. They're just happy to take it to showdown, and particularly at the lower stakes, guys are much less likely to doing this. So to me on the river, this is a super easy fold. It's not even something I would even really think twice about. I mean, I know that he's repping a fairly limited number of combos. However, you know, given his pre-flop stats, I just don't think this is a guy that's you know, able to either value bet a hand worse or turn a mate hand into a bluff here. And so if there's no hands that you beat, then, you know, even though what he's repping has a limited amount of combos, he has to have it in the end. And you know, I mean, it just comes down to the simple concept of, if a guy can't be bluffing, then he must have it. It doesn't really matter that there's not that many combos that he's repping. It just matters that he's not value betting worse.